Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this YD live session on one-on-one with Akshat. Before I start this session, I want to thank GMAT Love for organizing this and allowing us to reach out to you guys. Just a brief format for the session. We're going to have about a 40-minute Q&A, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for your questions. We expect this to be a fairly interactive session. And for those of you who can hear us, just a howler to say, yeah, we can hear you fine. So Akshat, welcome to the session. Congratulations on scoring a 750. And let's start with, how do you feel? How does that 750 feel? I know you scored a 750 on the 1st of January, so a really good gift for you.
Thanks, Rajat. Yeah, it was a great New Year gift for me. Got the score on my screen on 1st Jan. So feels very good.
Yeah, I was just asking Akshat prior to this. So we had about a 20-minute pre-session conversation. It's like, hey, so you didn't celebrate New Year's with a bang, and he's like, no, we. What did he just say? You watched a movie. You had what, a virtual party or something? What did he
Yeah,
say?
we had a virtual watch party. We watched a movie that night. That was it. There's COVID restrictions, so we can't really go out anyway.
Okay. All right. Which was very different from how I celebrated New Year, but that's a, a different story. So, Akshay, let's talk. We want to talk about your 750 journey. You want to talk about how you've navigated this. You've been a GMAT Club member. You solved up with the 500 questions on GMAT Club. You've been at this since March of 2021. And so you had this very interesting journey. We want to talk about the good habits you put in place. But let's first start with who you are, what is it that you do, and why did you decide to go for an MBA?
Yeah, sure. So I've done my undergraduation from BITS Hyderabad. Post that, I joined UBS as a financial analyst. Over there, my day-to-day life looks like, I just look at large amount of data, deal with numbers. Probably that's where my knack for quant comes from. And so last 2 years, I think I've gained a lot of experience and exposure in the finance industry, but it was also a very techno-functional role. So I've also gained some hands-on experience at developing tools and applications. Looking at the outside world, I think noticed that there's a lot of challenges and problems that are being tackled using not just finance and technology, but also other domains like operations or marketing or sales or supply chain. And I think that really fascinated me because there's so many challenges that I want to deal with. I think it inclines with my personal values. So I talked to a lot of seniors and colleagues, and it turns out that the best possible way to deal with this and get more exposure is the consulting industry, because consultants, on a day-to-day basis, deal with various challenges in different domains. Uh, to bridge the gap between me and the future version of me who's going to be a consultant, I think an MBA is the right way to go.
So essentially, he said, okay, just to reiterate some of these, he said, okay, understand the technical side of things. You're fairly good with numbers, but there are these other domains that you felt that you didn't have as much exposure to, and they intrigued you and said, okay, I want to do problem solving. I want to get that knowledge that I don't possess today, and hence the MBA. Um, Very interesting. Were there, I mean, how did you get exposed to these domains? And then as you got exposed, were there some instances, and I know we didn't talk about this, but um, did you get into a conversation or did you attend a meeting within UBS where you kind of said, okay, I understand somewhat what they're saying, but I don't understand how they're coming to this conclusion or how they're making these decisions. And man, I want to understand that. So was that something like that? I mean, what was that spark that really said, I got to do an MBA now?
Yeah, I think it's basically my day-to-day life, and I think recently it has been sparked up for last 1 year or so, where I've been watching a lot of podcasts from like different YouTubers, and they bring in different guests from various domains, and everyone is different. Someone's from biology, someone's researching about COVID, someone's doing astrophysics, and everyone has everyone is tackling serious problems here, serious challenges, and that's going to affect whether humanity progresses or not. And that really inspires me. I think there's so much we can do, and the best way to do a lot of things in a good way, a proper deep dive in those domains, is consulting. That's how I
Wow.
encountered these various fields.
Okay. So you decided you had to do an MBA, and so what was the first thing that you did, and then just let's talk at a very high level about your journey, and then we'll go deep dive into various portions of it.
Yeah, so as I said, this has been going for a few years. So I think March 2021 was when I decided that, it's about time we get started on this MBA journey. And I think initially I was weighing my options, whether, which geographic location to choose and which exams to give. There's CAT in India, there's GMAT. Eventually, I decided that GMAT is the journey I want to begin on. And that's how I, started.
So how did you decide? I mean, CAT versus GMAT. How did you narrow it down?
Yeah, I think for me, GMAT gave me a broader platform to explore. Basically, it opens avenues in not just India, but also outside India, US, and Europe. I think that was missing with the CAT aspect. So I decided to go for GMAT.
What about the fact that you just go valid for 5 years, or the fact that you can take it whenever you want? You don't have to.
Yeah, definitely. That was the plus points I used to, tell my friends that, the advantages of GMAT.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you start preparing for this test then?
So in March, the first thing I did was Google it, how to prepare for GMAT, and uh, definitely GMAT Club was the first suggestions on Google. So I opened it. I read some debriefs over there, how people go around preparing, and this GMAT like official guide and the official mocks were the things that were coming up a lot. So I thought that let's stick with official, and then I started solving all these OG questions. I solved a lot of OG questions, and then I took a few official mocks and went for my first attempt. That was the 690.
So and you say a lot of so let's kind of put this all on a timeline. So you started in March. When did you take that first attempt?
My first attempt was somewhere June, July. Yeah.
June, July. Okay, and
Probably
then
June. Yeah.
probably June. Okay, so it's about what 2 to 2.5 months of effort that you put in
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
What percentage of that effort was spent on verbal versus quant, if you were to guess?
I think 60-70% on verbal and maybe 30% on quants.
Okay, and then what was your prep strategy, or how many questions do you think you said solving questions? So how many questions did you
Yeah.
solve in verbal? Would again guesstimate.
Yeah, guesstimate only because I don't have the data. I think it would be about 400, 500 odd questions on verbal.
Okay, and then probably if I were to do the percentage difference in time, it's probably about 300 questions in quant, because you have 30% time in quant or so.
Yeah, that would
Okay,
be right.
did you take mocks during this
Yeah, I
time?
took mocks. I took mocks. I took Manhattan mocks. Yeah,
Okay, how many?
all of them.
All of
I
them.
think, yeah,
Okay, and what were you scoring in Manhattan on these mocks?
I was getting between 690, 700, 720, like that. Like that.
Okay,
That was the range. Yeah,
all right. And you purchased these mocks, then is what I'm
yeah,
assuming.
yeah.
Okay, all right, and so you got a 690, very kind of representative of what you were getting on those mocks as well. Did you take an official mock, by the way, in that attempt?
Yeah, I took. I got a 710 and 700 in the official mocks.
Okay, all right. So and I want you to go back, picture yourself coming back out of that first attempt. What were you telling yourself? Or what did Akshat tell himself? 690. I have a Q49 and what is it? Q50 and a V32. Yes, right.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Yeah, I think I would say that just exhausting questions without doing a review of those questions and how you solve it is very, not fruitful. So
but
I
that's
think,
Akshat now. What did you tell yourself then? Is what I'm saying.
while solving and
No,
not getting the
you
result.
imagine yourself returning from that 690 attempt. Q50,
Yeah,
V32, that's what you have in your hand. What did you tell
yeah.
yourself then?
Oh, I said that probably this did not work. Let's try it again. Let's give it another shot.
Okay, so you're a bright guy. You're a Bitsian. Bitsians are very bright. And I personally have a lot of respect for Bitsians. I was telling Akshat we're a Bitsian company, funded by Bitsians. Are the first few employees. In fact, you said you're from Bits Hyderabad, right?
Yeah.
Uh, the guy who who was one of the first three employees at e-GMAT, who was from Bits Hyderabad. He's still number three rated expert on GMAT Club, by the way. So his name was Krishna Chaitanya. So so yeah, so you said, okay, I'm going to be able to do this. So then what did you do? You had that 690 attempt. You gave another attempt.
Yeah, so I thought that verbal is lacking, so I should solve another good large amount of questions in verbal and get my
Mhm.
skill set up and give another shot at GMAT.
Mhm.
That's what I did.
Okay. And when was this next shot?
This was in late July, I think
Late July.
31st July.
Okay.
Yeah,
And this was another 690 attempt, right?
yeah, this was another 690.
The quant went down slightly, it was Q49, and a verbal
Yeah,
went up to a V35 or so. So you did this, you two attempts, solved a ton of questions, spent a lot of time, and so what did you tell yourself at that point? It's like, okay, I've done it twice, it's still 690. So then what?
yeah. Once it happened twice, I was not going to believe the same process again. So
Hmm.
I thought this has to change completely. And at the same time, I was encountering like GMAT Club reviews on e-GMAT.
Hmm.
So I had a conversation with Sandeep from e-GMAT, and then he took me through the courses, and that's how I landed at e-GMAT.
Okay. So then, and what did Sandeep tell you that you weren't aware after solving what 500-600 questions on verbal, about
Yeah.
a total of 1,000 questions? Let's call it that way. Having taken the GMAT twice, what were you not aware, and what convinced you to make that investment?
So he showed me around the whole verbal course. He showed me around the master comprehension, the Sigma X mocks, and told me that there are three stages to learning. And essentially, he showed me my weak spots and the gaps that I have. That's why I have inconsistent scores in previous mocks, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty sold on that. I was convinced that yeah, this proper strategic, three-stage learning might work this time. That's what
Got
I
it.
thought.
So you bought the course, and one of the things I want to talk about is the diligence with which Akshat put in time. But before that, I want to ask this question. I think this is regardless of whether you're talking about the first attempt, second attempt, or your time with EGMA. How did you take time out to study, and when did you study? Because you work full time, and I understand COVID makes it slightly easier because you're working from home. But I also
Yep.
see a guitar behind you, and it means you have extracurricular activities that you do. So when did you study? How much did you study? And yeah, how did you make time?
So for my first two attempts, I used to study post my office hours at night before sleeping. I usually spend a couple of hours at night.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's where I got, after working hours, I would get my time.
Okay. And what prior to starting studying for the GMAT, what did you do during those 2 hours that had to take a backseat?
I used to make a lot of music on, using the guitars that you can see.
Okay.
That used to occupy a lot of time. Yeah.
That used to occupy. So you had to really say, okay, consciously, I'm going to give this up for the duration of
Yeah,
my
it
GMAT
had to take the
preparation.
backseat. Yeah.
Okay, it had to take a back. So it was a conscious decision. Was it just you who was making all of this music, or were there other friends who were involved in?
No, this was all mostly solo projects. I had a stint with some other friends in between, but
Mhm.
yeah, I completed those without anything suffering.
Okay, so you don't have to explain it to others that, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this for a certain amount of time anymore.
No,
And
fortunately, that kind of situation I did not deal with.
okay, so let's come to the e-GMAT course, and so you bought the e-GMAT course, you attended the first onboarding session, and what did you
Yes.
learn from that session, and how did it impact your preparation, or how did it change how you
So
your outlook towards the GMAT?
yeah, I think the onboarding session gave us like general guidelines on how to extract like maximum benefit from the GMAT. Uh, so essentially, how to take notes, how to strategically review the questions, how to not exhaust questions, not
Mm,
overdo questions, everything, how to start from master comprehension to sentence correction and all. So it gave me a general, do's and don'ts
best
that
practices.
I, yeah, best practices that I did follow. So yeah,
Okay. All right. So you had this. Then which subsection did you start with right off from the e-GMAT course?
I started with the master comprehension. That's the core for all the verbal. I
Mm,
finished that, then I moved to sentence correction.
okay. And so as you went from master comprehension, so first of all, what did you learn from master comprehension, and that you did not know, and then what? And as you went towards the SC course, how did did it change how you approached sentence correction question, and if so, how?
Yeah, I did encounter master comprehension twice. One was the initial phase of my prep, and I think a couple of months later I had to revisit it because I later understood the big importance of that. So
Mm,
essentially, the master comprehension is something I used in all three: sentence correction, critical reasoning, and RC, not just
mm,
SC. It's essentially understanding a sentence in efficient way, like
mm,
where to pause and how to extract meaning.
mm.
I think that changed the game actually. That was very important. The whole MC course.
In what way?
So initially, my instinct was to use my ear to figure out if a sentence is right or wrong, and not really extract meaning. But master comprehension really focused on the meaning-based approach. So I would properly extract the full meaning of the sentence before I would even start applying grammar. And that extraction of meaning was only possible if I used the proper pause points and
Mm.
uh, proper sentence structure creation of any sentence that I was reading.
Got it. Okay. And once, yeah. So then you did the master comprehension, then you went to the SC course, and someone who would probably solve 4 out of 100 SC questions. Walk me through how you approach an SC question prior to going through the EGMAT SC course, and then how that approach changed as you went through the SC course.
Yeah, so prior to the course, I would read it, and based on my experience of reading, articles or whatever, I had some, instinct to feel that this sounds wrong or this sounds right, uh, and I was basically eliminating options using that.
Hmm.
And usually, the case would be that I would arrive at two options, and then I would, choose either the correct or one incorrect. So I was basically able to get it down to two. But
Hmm.
after the whole SC course, I started applying the meaning-based approach, and then and only then applying the grammar rules and eliminating the choices. So I think efficiency and accuracy increased.
Okay. Now, but as you applied the meaning-based approach, were there were you able to solve more questions correctly?
Yeah, I think that was the case because in the cementing quizzes that I took, I was almost immediately starting to see like 80% or 90% correctness. The accuracy was quite high initially.
Okay. Okay. Now, as you went through, actually, I think before even that, as you went through the SC course, you took notes. And we were
Yeah,
talking about it. He said when you started preparing with EGMAT, you know, you also bought an iPad
yeah,
to take notes, right? So
yeah.
how did you go about taking notes? And then tell me where did you buy it from so I can ask for some commission there.
Yeah. So I think that really aligned. Like when I started the SC course, I was um, basically making sure that I note down everything that would be useful for me to revisit without having to watch like the entire course again.
Mhm.
And for some reason, I was not in the mood for taking notes in a notebook in the traditional manner. For some reason, I
Mhm.
did not. I wanted the search ability to basically search through notes. Uh, so yeah, I think that really aligned well, and I started making proper notes for the entire course.
Okay, and so just to kind of add more detail to it, which let's start with the easy one. Which app did you use to take notes?
It's called Good Notes. Good
Good
Notes
notes.
5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then if walk me through like a typical study session during the day. So if you were to study, for example, for 2 hours during the day,
Yeah.
how much, and again, I know we don't calculate this time, but if you were to ballpark it, what proportion of your time would you, out of those 2 hours, would you spend on taking notes versus actually studying content on the platform?
I think note taking was pretty significant part of it. So I would give it 30% weightage
That's
of the
pretty
total
good.
time.
And that's a really good habit. And I can tell you this is something that so for those of you, I don't think many of you are in Phoenix, Arizona, but if you ever see us out there, you would see me with this something like this. This is a remarkable, it's a note-taking device. That's all it does. Doesn't let me go to a web browser. All it does is read PDFs and take notes. And that's what Pyle and I carry around with us. Our time on a computer is probably, I mean, it's cut down our time on PC to about half of what it used to be. And just taking notes, even in this digital world, the analog process of taking notes, I think it's one of the most important things when you truly want to go in depth into something. If you are aiming for that 750, you're aiming for upwards of 90th percentile in each subsection, you have to take notes. So let's go back. You went through the SC course, you did well in cementing. Did you go through the strategic review process?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think I went through the whole strategic review. Basically, there were videos how to do it properly.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I went through it, I think, twice because it was a little bit difficult to grasp. There's a lot of things happening, how to do it
Yes.
properly. So I went through it twice and tried to absorb everything.
And this is something that I want to make sure you guys get it. So, I mean, Akshat's a very smart guy, and even he didn't get the strategic review process completely in the first go. But the key over here is to trust the process, make sure you go at it again. Because if something makes logical sense to you, and I'm sure the reason you went through it twice is because even in the first go, it made sense as to this is how you build error logs.
Yeah.
And so he went through it twice, and I think you probably um, benefited from it because you didn't solve a ton of questions, SC questions. I was just looking at your account, you solved half as many as I mean, half the questions in SC are still available to you. So,
Yeah.
and you were able to get to this phenomenal score. It's actually a lot about the quality that you do. So we talked about SC. Let's talk about CR. So, and let's go through the same process. You went through the master comprehension course. You'd done CR before you actually finished the entire course again, despite the fact that you already had that V35. So, what did you learn from the CR course, and how did that benefit you?
Yeah, I think the CR thing was very new. Prior to the course, I was approaching CR at a very,
Hmm.
I would say, in hindsight, I can say that not the best way. But post completing the course, I think the pre-thinking approach was very useful. Uh, again, I had to do it twice. Some parts of it because it was really hard to grasp everything. Especially in the assumption type questions. So yeah, I think that pre-thinking was a game changer in the CR questions.
And then, I mean, of course, your accuracy went up. How did your time to answer questions? How did it impact the time to answer questions?
I think I would say that I was using more time to get accurate answers, but like I think for me accuracy was more important because uh, initially I would guess or have a tendency to guess and proceed further, but that was not really helping. So perhaps there was not much change in the time aspect, but I think accuracy went up quite a bit post the course.
Got it. Um, and assuming you went through the cementing and the strategic review process in CR as well.
Yeah, yeah. I went all three stages for everything in verbal. I did not leave
Okay.
anything.
All right. So let's talk about RC. In the first two attempts, you didn't focus as much on RC, right?
Yeah.
In the third attempt, did you focus on RC?
Yeah, third attempt. So essentially, RC is something that it's not like one question can be done in 2 minutes, right? It's like
Hmm.
a 4 or 5 question group. So
Hmm.
there's more time commitment in each RC. And that was the reason I did not spend much time initially. But with e-GMAT, I was able to go through the courses, inference methods, etc. And it was quite conceptual. So it wasn't very hard for me to skip. I mean, So I did everything in the RC
Okay.
course.
Did you apply the reading strategies? Were you reading the passage more carefully in
Yeah, I
RC?
think it. Yeah, yeah, definitely, because it resonates with the master comprehension thing also, and that was the game changer for me in RC. Also, I was taking notes in RC that I was not doing in my first two attempts. So
Got it.
while I was reading, I was making pointers of the passages.
Okay. It's making notes. I just want to know. So now you're done with the GMAT prep. I don't know it's been just 11 days since you've been done with it. Um, have you carried on that habit of taking notes in your day-to-day work? Do you still take notes, or is it just limited to the GMAT?
Yeah, I think I'm getting a bit obsessed with notes these days. I'm also expanding to other note taking apps now, like Notion, etc., where I'm taking more
Oh,
notes about personal projects, etc., and
good.
you know, making frameworks, etc. So yeah, I think I'm pretty obsessed with these notes.
Yeah, Notion. I want to check out Notion. It's something that's on my list. I've used a lot of Evernote. I use a lot of OneNote. Um,
Yeah,
I haven't checked Notion out. Um, and we've been into note taking for the last 10 years now. This dedicated devices we've just bought now, but we've always had Microsoft Surface devices that have had really good pens. So um, so yeah, okay, that's good. Now let's talk about Scholarlinium. So you did the cementing quizzes. That's one way how you utilize Scholarlinium. How else did you utilize Scholarlinium?
I think the biggest way I utilized Scholarlinium was the data, the dashboard that it shows. The first thing when you land on it is it's showing the last three quizzes that you took. It shows a
Mm,
graph if you're going, if you're improving or not improving. It
mm,
also shows the overall status of your verbal, like including medium and hard questions. So I was using that to gauge like my next steps in prep.
mm,
You know, like focus areas essentially.
mm. What are
So
some of
yeah,
the focus areas that you found at various times, and then how did you tackle those?
yeah, so actually, if you in Scholarlinium, you can go deeper to the skill data level, and there it shows like there it groups the questions in different blocks, like verbal, sorry, verb tenses, subject, verb, etc. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, over there, you can clearly see which one is lacking the most. And I had these for example, pronouns. I was pretty bad at it. Comparisons, I was bad. Like it showed me that I have like 40% in that. So I just picked those. I went back to stage one and I did everything in that again.
So basically, because in SC you have these block level grouping, and you say comparison, parallelism come together, and you can really see, okay, that grouping's accuracy for the last 10 questions in hard difficulty level is way lower than that for modifiers in the last 10 or last 15. And you'd say,
Yeah,
okay, this is what's keeping my SC score down. So rather than worrying about solving modifier questions, I'm going to focus on solve these and go back, relearn those. Maybe there are some gaps there, and then come back and practice those questions through the custom quiz engine. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and you used it in the right way. I'm glad that you did. Now, mocks. Actually, let's
yeah,
go to quant. You were very good in quant. You still went through portions of the quant course. Why was
yeah.
that?
Uh, I think I was doing everything properly for verbal, and I thought that why am I going to do anything different for quant? So one good thing was that there were these diagnostic tests in the quant stage one.
Mhm.
So I would take those, and they would like help me identify if I need to proceed with the rest of the course, or just I can skip that particular subsection.
Mhm.
So I thought that stage one is not worth skipping because these diagnostic tests are anyway, fun to do and they are helpful. So I did everything.
Okay. Okay. And which areas did these diagnostics tests tell you that you needed to focus on? So yeah.
Yeah, essentially, when you complete the diagnostic test, you get a video pop up based on the score, and it tells you that based on the score, it tells you that you have to do either everything, or you can just do the practice quizzes, and or you can go to the next section essentially. So I followed those things.
Okay. That's good. Now let's talk about marks. You took all the 5 marks, right?
Yeah.
So how did you pace out these marks? Number one, and then how was the experience of taking these marks versus taking the Manhattan or the official marks?
So pacing out these mocks was something that I was being, helped. by DJ on that when to take
Mhm.
the mocks. So I was relying on those, except for mock 4. And in terms of comparisons with others, I think it starts off with you inputting your target score that you want here.
Mhm.
So I would always put 50 and 41 and
Mhm.
get a 750 is my basically target score in that. Then
Mhm.
proceed. Uh, I think, yeah, I think level of difficulty was very, very similar to the actual, GMAT, or probably a tad bit difficult, I would say.
They are a tad bit. I mean, on the quant side, it's slightly more challenging, yes.
Yeah,
So okay. Um, Now you got a 640 or 2 weeks before
yeah,
your actual. I want to talk about that. So let's. So you took a mock test 2 weeks before the actual attempt. You got a
yeah.
640. Walk me through that day. What was going on in your mind when you saw that 640 attempt?
I think it was mixed emotions because one side of me was confused and shocked to see that score, and I felt like this is going back to square one. But the other side was like, first of all, DJ did not ask me to take a mock. Secondly, like I have all this data proving that all the cementing quizzes, custom quizzes, and my previous mocks are showing that I have the skill level. So this
Hmm.
has to be an anomaly, and that's what DJ also told me.
Hmm.
So
So
I
you
thought
reached out
that,
to DJ after you took this mock test.
yeah, that's the first thing I did after, without even closing the tab of mock, I just emailed DJ that,
Hmm.
so and so happened. Uh, so yeah, I think, I mean, I took it in a positive way. I checked my incorrect questions,
Hmm.
filled the error log with those, and then I moved forward with the prep
So what
and
did
got.
that error log tell you? The 640 attempt. You didn't do as well on quant as well as on verbal. I think you did terrible. So what did
Yeah.
it tell you when you filled that error log, and or what confidence did it give you?
I think those errors that I made in that particular test were not the usual errors that I would make. They were not even conceptual errors. They were more about application based errors. So I was not applying the process properly. So essentially, it's almost like I had forgotten master comprehension that I had done. Almost
Hmm.
forgotten that sentence structures need to be made. Not taking notes in the RC. Just using the mouse to select the. Basically, I
Hmm.
was not using the whiteboard at all.
And this is something which is very important. I think that's really fundamental that I would say. Um, it's important to have good, consistent data points throughout your prep because something like this will happen if you're not at 100%. And especially if you take a mock test because mocks are brutal. They are designed to get the best out of you. They're also designed to expose the worst of you. And in your case, for this particular mock, it did expose the worst out of you because you probably were lazy that day. You were not taking you're not doing you said sentence structures, or you were not taking the meaning analysis forward while choosing the options, or you weren't taking the pre-thinking forward in CR, or in RC you weren't doing, as you said, you weren't taking notes. So essentially you did not really map the passage properly. And if you do that, it'll expose it. I mean, you're still the same individual. It's just different behaviors will lead to different scores. And the mock test is just a reflection of who you were on that day. And but those other stats are a reflection of what your ability is. It's like um, sugar in a teacup. The sugar is there whether you stir it or not, as that particular instance of mock. If you put the sugar there and don't stir it, the tea isn't as sweet or the score isn't as high. If you stir it, score is high. It doesn't mean the sugar isn't there, if or it doesn't mean the ability isn't there. So very, very important piece. So take monitor stacks, um, or stats throughout your prep so that you can figure out an anomaly, rather than something which is a regular occurrence. So and there's a good question. How do you stick to the same method every time? I think let's or the SC process or CR process. So how do you do that? I think that's a question which I'm anyhow coming towards the end. So but how did you do it every time, barring that mock attempt, of course?
I think 2 months into my e-GMAT learning, it was when I was watching some debrief, and That's when I heard this trust the system thing, and that's when I thought about it. What's the system they are talking about, and what's the trust? And that's why I realized that it's actually the method, the three stages, and then the application process. And even in the strategic reviews, it's basically you breaking down the error into two parts. One is either the error could be a conceptual gap, for which you have to go and basically read again, or it could be an application process where you couldn't apply it properly, like you know it but you did not follow the sentence structures or something like that. So either of those things could be the reason for you faltering. And when I figured out that concept is something I've done twice already, so third time if I'm making a mistake in this, then it has to be application process. So I designed this in my notes. I have this proper steps to solve a question, and I stuck to it basically just to get the consistency in the accuracy.
So very well said. I think the piece for Rohan in this case is it's you have to consciously do it. There is no other way around. And that's what separates. I mean, think about it. 98th percentile, 750 score, 98. There's a reason why only top 2% of people get there, right? It is about being deliberate about applying these methods. If you're not deliberate, you won't be able to get there. And I mean, and that's one of the big differences between Akshat's 690 attempt and that 750 attempt. It's being deliberate. It's going through that grind, and that's, I think, really important. Now, one last question that I have before we open this to the Q&A pod, questions over here is support. So, 4 or 5 month long journey. What is the role of the support team, and how did that and how did that contribute to that 750 score?
It was a very big role actually, and I think it resonates with what you mentioned about the work. I work full time, right? And how do I get time to prepare? And how do I stick to this whole preparation? So the support I got was basically we had a weekly plan. I was sticking to that weekly plan. I was keeping DJ in the loop about, I'm doing so and so, and these are my scores. How should I go about doing next? Like, what would be more suitable for me next? And I think that was a very big part, to and fro. Basically, I got a lot of feedback on my prep throughout this 5-6 month long journey.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's one of those things which is important in terms of getting the one of the big things which when it comes to support is you've got to be confident that the person who's giving you support knows what he or she is talking about, and their inputs seem logical. And one of the things that we try and do, and this is something that we've been able to achieve over the last 1 year, is that people who are providing you support either themselves have a 700 or higher score, or have had at least 20 students achieve that. Because that, in our opinion, is when you kind of have an idea of the DNA of a successful student, and the habits, and then the metrics. So for metrics are easy to teach, but it's the habits and just the DNA of someone being successful. And then actually your case is classical, where as I say, despite the fact that you started with a high score, you went through everything diligently. There were pieces that you didn't understand the first time. You actually did not give up on them. You attempted them the second time. That's kind of the DNA of a successful, was someone who really wants to get to that 750 score. Similarly, the good habits that you put in with regards to taking notes, recognizing master comprehension, and the corresponding importance of it. So then another question, I think. So this was my last question, and I think let's kind of take on questions that are there. I'm going to take Mohammad's question here. Did you learn verbal and quant at the same time, or did you prepare them sequentially?
Yeah, so verbal happened first. I think first 1.5 month was pure verbal. I was not doing quant. Then quant happened, but while quant was happening, I had my notes in verbal that I was like going back to again and again. So I did not forget verbal while I was doing quant. So that was the sequence: verbal, then quant. Yeah.
One of the things which I want to really say, I think, and this is so that's what he did, and this is what most of our students do as well. There's the reason why we go through this process called cementing. Why? Because cementing, as the name suggests, once you go through that process, and you have to. So let's kind of take a step back. When you're improving from a 50th to a 90th percentile, you have to focus on one thing. So if in quant, so if in SC you had to do just SC without worrying about other pieces, And you have to make sure you achieve that 75th 80th percentile in SC before you move to CR. Do the same thing in CR before you move to RC. It's just how learning works. Doesn't matter whether you're learning verbal or whether you're learning quant. Okay. um, so that's one piece. The second piece is, making notes, as Akshat has talked about, really useful. It just keeps you there, and that's because those notes are taken by you. That's why they're valuable to you. There's nothing that I can give you that can be just as valuable as those notes would be, because you remember what your brain was thinking when you took those notes. So I think that's something which is very important. Okay. Let's look at another question here, which I think is more for me. Um, the question that was there was, how do universities give scholarships, and on what's the basis? So there are two ways to think about it. And Akshat and I was talking about this early on, and we actually on our website we have a page where we have about, I think, 50 case studies where people have gotten scholarships. e-GMAT have gotten upwards of $200 million of estimated scholarships. Um, so the way universities give scholarships is that they really just look at and say, okay, who is it that they really like, and then how likely are they going to get an admit from another competitive university. So for example, if you were to look at Booth, Booth would look at how likely is this candidate going to get an admit from Columbia, or Wharton, and then accordingly they say it's very likely he's going to get an admit from Wharton. So we've got to, and we really like him, is going to be useful for our community. Then from their endowment money that they get for scholarships, they're going to offer a slice of scholarship money to you. So in many ways, your scholarship is dependent on that GMAT score and B, your likability during the interview. That's there. And both of them are important. If you don't have a high GMAT score, you're not likely to get admits into a ton of other schools. If you don't like you during the interview, you won't be considered valuable um, to that particular business school, and so you would not be offered you may not be offered scholarships. So those are the two things. Is it true that scholarships are given on a first come first basis? No, they're not. So round one, round two, absolutely very very similar likelihood of scholarship. So it's not on a first come first serve basis, and that's kind of where we say, make sure. My personal case, when I applied, and that was eons ago. So but the same stats are still very true. I did not have a single dime in round one. I got multiple full rides in round two. So that's a classical case. I've seen that happen. I mean, scholarships are even there in round three. They're just given to deserving students. It's just that the kitty in round three is slightly is not as much as that in round one and round two. But schools understand that they're going to get enough good candidates in round one and round two, so they keep enough money in round one and round two. Okay. So yeah, it's not on a first come first serve basis or so. So in fact, sometimes if you really just show a lot of desperation for a certain school, my personal hypothesis, and I have enough data to back it up with, is that even though you might have been considered for a scholarship, if you really say you really want to get to that school, they might not offer you a scholarship because they already know that particular school is your number one choice. Okay. So Rohan has another question, I think, which is for you. Can you summarize the process for SCCR and RC concepts? How did you approach these questions?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty long answer. So SCA is basically first I start with sentence structure. So I break down the sentence into the meaning, extract the meaning, and then I follow the grammar check logic, which is basically checking the subject verb pairs if they make sense, then the verb tenses, pronouns, etc., modifiers. Then I eliminate the options. Usually, this, I mean, it sounds pretty long, but all this happens in under 2 minutes. Usually, you can get a habit if you practice enough. For CR, I read, extract meaning, and then I start thinking about the conclusion. I mean, obviously, identify the conclusion, then think about the conclusion, and then depending on the question, like if it's asking to weaken or find the assumption, I proceed based on the conclusion that I identify. For RC, as I mentioned, I take notes while reading the passage, and usually those notes help me to navigate back to the passage if I need to, based on the question. Yeah.
Okay. And so I think one of the things that you would draw and take away from this is, no tricks here. It's all about the fundamentals. It's all about understanding what you read, and it's all about, so in CR, for example, thinking about the conclusion. That's a really important step. We internally call it the ability to visualize. That's very, very important. If you don't visualize the conclusion, there's no way you're going to be able to solve difficult CR questions. And if you want to achieve that 90th percentile, you want to be able to do that. Similarly, in RC, taking notes is about absorbing information, and there's a lot that is there in it. So, what note should you take? When should you pause to take notes? The role that keywords play. So, if you attend this week's RC session, you're going to understand that. And by the way, the session is designed by Pyle, so that's something that it's one of our most appreciated sessions. So definitely attend that, and you'd get to see those fundamental approaches that are there. There's another very good question that was there, which was that Rishabh said, 2 months of prep, V24, Q47. Yes, Akshat, for you.
Yeah, I think here the verbal has a lot of scope for improvement. So I think you should be also following the same verbal, starting with verbal sentence correction. So basically, focus on meaning. Basically, meaning based approach can help you in sentence correction and RC, and to some extent CR also. So once you're able to extract meaning from a sentence, I think that alone should give you a good jump in verbal, and then you can fine tune each subsection depending on your data. So I think you can refer to the skill data in the Scholarlinium and then decide on that.
Okay, good metrics. I think that's something which is there, and really good metrics. And I agree with what Akshat is saying. I think the piece when I look at this, yes, both quant and verbal have headroom. Verbal definitely has way more headroom, as Akshat said. The piece that I would want you to do is focus on one subsection and start with SC. Your verbal score is very low, um, and again, that's not a cause for worry. It's just that you have to be mentally ready that you're going to take a certain amount of time to improve. It's not going to happen in 20 days. It's most likely that verbal improvement by itself to that 35 is probably something that you're looking at about 140 to 150 hours of investment easily. So be mentally prepared for it. Be mentally prepared to learn the basics. Um, in my opinion, where people falter is when they expect miracles, and when they give up, they don't trust the process. So trust that process. You've been at it for 2 months, and you probably um, are A, either solving questions, or B, just focused on learning concepts rather than learning methods. So focus on learning, start to love learning, and that V35 is not going to be challenging for you. That's something that I can really say. If you focus on just practicing, if you worry about that score, you're going to find that you struggle, or you're going to find that you get frustrated. So that's something that I would say, Rishabh, um, is what you should do. Okay. Um, let's look at Shivan's question, which is um, often MBA applicants have changed the world goals in their MBA application. Do applicants who are looking to join investment banking, PE, post MBA also require change? First of all, I'm not sure how you got that notion that the MBA applicants have changed the world goals. They don't. They have good practical goals that need to be there. One of the things that I will tell you, Shivam, is that essentially you whatever goal you put in as your post MBA, one of the first things an admissions officer is going to do is go and take that goal to the placement committee head and say, how likely is this guy, given his or her background, going to get to those goals? And if the answer is not as likely, regardless of your rosy background, you're not going to get in there. In fact, Juhi, if you can share Sharang's interview, that's a classical case. So Sharang was one of the former EG matters, currently studying at Keenan Flagler. He had a 740, got rejected in his first uh, uh, application cycle, despite a 740, because he had changed the world goals and or the wrong set of goals. In a second attempt, he actually then, when he got all rejects, he joined e-GMAT. He worked at e-GMAT. He was an e-GMAT student, and he worked at e-GMAT for a year. Did a bunch of wonderful things. The program that you see with DJ Akshat is an outcome of the work that Sharang did. Um, and not the 740 interview, Juhi, but his application interview, please. um, and then in a second attempt he had much more realistic goals that for which he had the background that to prove that okay, he's in a on a good path to achieve them, which was more around product management. And he got multiple admits with scholarship. I mean, right now he has about 60% scholarship for his MBA. So, so no, they are not change the world goals. They are good logical goals that matter. So anyone who's telling you you have to have changed the world goals, end poverty, put a stop to hunger, ensure that the COVID response is more coherent, even that's not the right way to go. Go with your heart. Go with what you want to do. Okay, and this is the right link, by the way. Um, that's there. Let's take Mohsin's question, and Mohsin, I have a clarification. I mean, you have an interview call, so you took a diagnostic. So I mean, you have an interview. So I'm not sure what the GMAT's going to do for you. But again, your question in essentially very similar to the question that I think who else had not Shivam. I think was it Rishabh's question itself. Yeah, Rishabh's question. Focus on one subsection or one section, either quant or verbal. You have a lot of headroom on either one. Improve on that, and then go to the other section. That's. I mean, other than that, the answer is this. Ideal time. I mean, if you're looking at a 700, you're looking at about 240, 250 hours of prep time. So depending on how many hours you can do per week. So if you can put in about 20 odd hours per week, you're looking at what 10 and a half, 10 to 15 weeks of prep time. Again, remember this. A lot, prep time depends on what we can tell you, plus the diligence that you put in. And I think this is where Akshat, I want you to really chime in as well. So when you are studying, you have this temptation to really say, okay, I've been studying for 40 minutes. I want to let me watch a 5-minute YouTube video. Did you do that, or if you did, how did not? Then how did you resist that temptation?
I think I had this tendency to do it, but this like I would have done it if it was more like offline learning. But e-GMAT like is in my bookmarks on top, so it was always I could see that bookmark button to go to e-GMAT and land on the SC page and do a course over there. So I wouldn't spend too much time on YouTube and get drifted and waste hours. I think I would probably just pivot back very quickly, one video, and then I'm back to learning.
Yeah, and that's something which is really important, and that's also the benefit of a video instruction course. It even when you're reading something, you get bored a lot easily. But if you're watching a concept, it keeps your focus for those 40 minutes, and it's really important for you to not break that focus, because otherwise, when you're watching, let's say, a comparison video, you want to be completely immersed in there, because there's something that you're learning, but there's also in parallel you should be thinking about, okay, what all comparisons do I see in my day-to-day life? How are they worded? And if you're not thinking about that, you're not going to be able to reach that 90th percentile ability. So for someone who's starting from a very low ability to, or regardless of where you're starting from, the key when you say how many months of preparation or how many weeks is how diligent are you during your preparation. I'll again take Sharang's example. Sharang went from a V32 to a V41 in 15 days. Okay, 15 days. And the guy who did it full time, he was super diligent while doing it. And he's that person who can do this. He would just do this, and that was it. Very few people can do it that way. So So again, understand who you are, change some of those habits, and acing the GMAT. Yes, there is the process side to it. Yes, there is the conceptual side to it, but there's also the mental side to it, which is very important. And you've got to conquer that mental side of the test. If you don't conquer it, then we can't help you. That's something that I can tell you. So tell yourself, in fact, put stuff on your wall saying this is something that I won't do, and do it for a week. Don't say I'm not going to do this for 4 months or 3 months. Let's say I'm not going to do this for 5 days. If you just put that 5 day goal, and then maybe you don't study for a day and do just that, but if you put that 5 day goal, the confidence that it will give you is going to be huge. And then consequently you'd be able to do it for another 5 days or another 6 days or another 10 days. So yeah. Chirag, I think your approach is very similar to what we've been talking about. Focus just on verbal. If you have a Q49 and a V18, start from the very basics. Start with the master comprehension course and then move on. So yeah. Shivam saying, do we provide guidance for application process? We unfortunately we don't. It's just something we can't scale up to. I mean, it's just think about it this way. Work with about 10,000 students a year. Um, if we start providing this, how do we scale this up, and who do I say no to? It becomes very difficult for us to do this, and which is one of those things where we say, hey, if we can't do a good job for everyone, we will not do it. So yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very much for joining us today. It was wonderful having you guys. Thank you for those excellent questions. And again, I want to see you guys on egmat.com. Take the free trial. Also make sure that you attend the free sessions this weekend. And with that, as I always say, happy learning. And Akshat, thank you um, for taking the time. Where it was excellent, and I'm sure people learned a lot from your journey.
Thank you, Rajat.
Hmm. I think Juhi, you probably